Are you ready when the job offer comes in? Welcome to Negotiating a Job Offer. The 3 modules in this course will help you adopt the right mindset, prepare you with the essential research, and give you a step-by-step framework for negotiating the whole package. This is the first module of our 3-part series and will give you the information you need on the what, why, and when of negotiation. At the end of this brief lesson, you'll understand what a negotiation is and what it isn't, identify the benefits of negotiation, and determine when you should negotiate a job offer. Throughout this module, you'll see strategies to use and examples of dialogue between a recruiter and candidates to get an understanding of what you shouldn't say. Let's get started. First, it is important to understand just what a negotiation is. If you are nervous or reluctant to try negotiating a job offer, you're not alone. More than half of job candidates never negotiate when offered a position. Since your initial salary has an impact on your earnings for the rest of your working life, it's critical to ensure that you're getting a fair salary package. The biggest mistake someone can make is going in thinking that negotiation is a battle, where someone wins and someone loses. And that's what makes negotiating a job offer a scary prospect. But going into it knowing that both sides are working towards the same thing, you taking the job, makes the idea of negotiating a little less overwhelming. Negotiation is really just a conversation with the goal of reaching an agreement with someone whose interests are not perfectly aligned with yours. Negotiation is collaborative problem solving in action, working together to find a solution that makes both you and your counterpart better off. In this case, they've offered you the position, which means they think you're the best candidate and want you to work for them. And you want the position with a fair compensation package. So now you just need to work together to find a solution that gives you the package you deserve and that falls within their compensation plan. That's the solution that will make both parties happy. That brings us to the first strategy. For a negotiation to be successful, you can't focus just on what you need or want. A negotiation has to benefit both parties. Here's an example of our candidate who's not on the right path to successful negotiation. Your counterpart doesn't care about how much you need to pay rent or that you want to go on a cruise next year. You need to demonstrate how the company will benefit from bringing you on board. Now let's take a look at why you should negotiate. The obvious answer is financial. Negotiating just $5,000 more on an initial salary offer of $50,000 results in $500,000 in lifetime earnings when you get the standard 2 to 3% yearly raise. Aside from the financial reason we just talked about, there's a cost of not negotiating if the offer is not a fair one. How would you feel if you take a salary you believe is lower than you should earn? How long do you expect you will stay in that position? It's worth getting a number you feel good about. Some people worry that an employer might rescind the offer. But remember this, employers make an offer because that candidate is the candidate of choice. Most employers see the value of reaching an agreement with their top choice. Recruiting is an expensive prospect, and the company has a goal to hire the best candidate as quickly as possible. They don't want to go back to interviewing. Employers will rarely rescind a job offer. If an employer does rescind a job offer, it is more likely due to communication or personality, meaning how demands are made rather than the request to negotiate. Careful, respectful, and researched negotiation will result in both parties being satisfied. If a company won't even discuss the package, you have to ask yourself if you want to work somewhere so unwilling to work together to solve a problem. Now let's take a look at when you negotiate. The timing is very important. When do you negotiate? When you have an offer in hand, not before. A big mistake is starting a negotiation too early. You should only try to negotiate when you have an offer in hand. There are things you can do to prepare early on in the process, but should avoid discussing salary during the interview stage. But sometimes the employer or recruiter brings up salary first. In the interview, you may be asked, "What salary are you looking for?" Recruiters do this to see if you're wasting their time and sometimes to try to get the upper hand on the negotiation. That brings us to our second strategy, delay discussing salary. Here, our candidate gives good examples of responses you can use to delay the conversation. First, explain that you'd like to learn more about the position before you talk salary. If that doesn't work, see if the company will share what their hiring range is. If they keep pushing, you can share the range you're exploring. You don't want to be difficult, so you'll have to read the situation. If they won't progress without having some of your salary target in mind, you'll need to provide something. We'll cover how to set your salary numbers in Module 2. You may also be asked, what did you make at your last job? You do not have to share this information. Your personal finances are your business, and your past salary should have no bearing on what you expect in a new position, especially if you are changing fields or pursuing your first professional position. If they keep pushing, you may have to say something, but it is better to name a target range. Our candidate here provides a few good responses to those questions. When do you negotiate? When you haven't already accepted at a lower salary. Once you've accepted an offer, you can't go back to negotiation. Trying to negotiate after you've accepted is unprofessional and can be considered underhanded or manipulative. And back to the discussion of employers rescinding offers. Trying to renegotiate after you've accepted is one of the reasons employers have stated for pulling an offer. If you accepted before you were prepared, the best thing to do is work hard and be ready to ask for a raise in your first performance evaluation in 6 or 12 months. When do you negotiate? When the offer is lower than the industry, your experience, or the location warrants. This is the primary reason you should negotiate, and this must be based on your research. Do not negotiate just to negotiate. The truth is, the company is probably starting with a fair salary to begin with, and you'll know this if you've done your research. And finally, you should only negotiate if you can articulate your value to the organization. Things like related professional experience, specific competencies like language, technical skills, and project experience, education, particularly if it's higher than required, and flexibility for start date or working time. If you can't justify your reasons for a higher salary or change to the package in terms of what you can contribute, you should not negotiate. For example, if you've been offered a position in a field where you have little to no professional experience, it can be difficult to justify a higher salary. So to review, negotiation is working together to come to a mutually agreeable solution. Don't think of it as a battle. You should negotiate because it is important that you feel like you're receiving a fair package. It makes a difference to both your job satisfaction and your long-term salary outlook. You should only negotiate after you receive an offer that is lower than the job and your qualifications warrant. And you should only negotiate when you can demonstrate that skills and experience command a higher salary. Now you should have a good understanding of the what, why, and when of negotiating. Your next step? Review the module on how to prepare for negotiation.